All right, and we are live. Good evening, everyone. Hope everyone had a decent long weekend here. Um, just a quick disclaimer, anything you see in this video is not financial advice. This is just a market overview to hopefully guide you in your process of trading. All right, so first and foremost, I will always take a look at our weekly candle here. Um, Nothing particularly crazy about the weekly candle. It is a longer candle. It unfortunately did not reach the previous high, so we're technically at a lower high, and also a lower low. And there is a sloping resistance here playing out. That doesn't necessarily mean um bearish, but it's good to have some sloping resistances because even if we're in a bull trend, at least you have a target that you can, expect to wait for it to cross over. Um, let's take a look at my little trend lines here that I noticed. This is just a weekly chart. So this pink line is what I was mentioning before about us having a slight downtrend here. Um, but one thing I did notice as well, we also have a wedging taking place with this blue line here. For any upside, I would definitely like want to see us start to close above this trend to break this downwards channel that we have. Um, if you want to achieve any new highs, of course, we still need to take 603, which is congruent with this blue line here. So if we hold over it, we'll be in the 601, 602, 603 range here to retest. As well as our weekly expected highs and lows are on the chart here. I don't know why the low is not here. Let's head to the daily. So our weekly expected high is around 606, and our lows are, where are they? Right here. 5, I believe it's 589. Let's see what I put it at. 589.25. Again, weekly expected lows are just kind of giving you a range of where a lot of the volume is for the week. I basically use an option straddle, so it takes a look at the volume within a range and where people are like placing orders. So, in this large upper range, now we're kind of above the midpoint of our little consolidation chop that we had here, whatever you want to call it. One thing I noticed on the daily is, of course, we have a lot of gaps here, but we do have all of our SMAs are pointing up. So our 20 is slowly catching up. Obviously, our 5 is going to have some like massive action because we just jumped up twice, 2 days in a row. Well, not in a row, but 2 days in the week. But our 50 SMA is a nice smooth uptrend, right? Which is good. So you want to see this smoothing here happening because if our SMAs have, or especially our larger SMAs, like our 50 SMA, if it starts to have some like huge peaks similar to like the 5 day moving average peaks, um, it's not consistent with a slow growing stock or just growth stock, right? You want to see some, you know smoother slopes, either upside or downside with our EMAs or SMAs. Let's see, what else did I notice? Oh yes, for the daily candle here, we opened kind of with a ugly little candle. It's in the middle. We're working above and below. One thing I did notice is we are at almost, you could say, an equal high as for our previous high in the structure here happening on the 6th. So it seems to have continued rejection around the like 599.58 level. So I would like to see us to like close above that for any continued upside, and let's test this channel that we had for quite some time here. Um, Notice how the high of the week is just above the channel, which is common for any look above and fails, right? Or look above, retest, and breakout. So let's bear in mind and take a look at that. 603 is going to be really, really important. So if you want to see any upside, we really need to like capture 603. Even if we start closing above 601, 602, all the hype is there. Um, expect whatever pullbacks may take place, but you really want to see us closing over the 603.85 level before you can feel any confidence that we're going to either test new highs or break out for new highs. And let's go through our pathing for the week. I'll drop it down to the hourly. Again, all the levels here I will post at the end. You'll see it in the market overview channel. Um, my lines are still red and green, so I gotta work on changing those lines. So just to sort of ignore the red lines in between lower, because any resistance now acts as support. So I will be changing those colors as well. So one thing that we noticed on last week before we had this gap up, last week we were mentioning that we were right around, where's the 13th, right, the 10th right here, right? So last week we mentioned that on the daily we had a chance of a retest of our bottom channel here. This is our Friday close, so a retest here, some sort of a bounce, and a rejection around 584, or continued downside with a. Let's draw those out. Right. So on Friday we were looking for a bounce here for any continued downside, as well as any break below. So getting into our supports here, retest and then rejection. Obviously, none of those things took place because we did end up recapturing the channel here and going towards an upside. So I just wanted to know what happened last week so we can get an idea of how we're looking at the charts here. So for the one hour chart, we're going to be looking at the pathing here. So there's a ton of gaps here. Interesting thing, for me personally, if we do end up having some strong pullback, filling these gaps don't necessarily mean that we're gonna either immediately reverse or go down. Uh, a likely event that could happen is we could go anywhere in this gap. We don't need to fill this gap. Again, the gap for SPY is going to be a lot larger than, let's say, QQQ, or I mean IWM is not too bad, but especially QQQs, we'll see in a second. The chart is not as gapped, because part of the gap that we have here is due to the financial sector having huge gap ups as well, right? And with QQQ, it's mainly tech based, so there's not as much financial sectors in there for to really get that push up. So a lot of the upwards momentum we had on QQQ was just truly led by SPYs having a bullish trend. So let's erase this again. All right, so we'll go through some outcomes here. So I would like to see us have a pullback here, retest our 595 pivotal point here, before a little bit of consolidation in this range. Give it a day or two, let things settle, um, especially post Trump. So in settling with SPY nowadays could literally just be this. So you can also expect that, but I really want to see us close over our 599.58 level that we mentioned earlier. So even if we have some consolidation in this range, I would look to close above here before any continued upside. Again, with our upside, we do have our target near 606, but I realistically 603 would be a cleaner target for any upside if we can close over this 600 level or 599.58. All right, and then for our, I would say, neutral bearish, neutral bullish instead of bearish outcome we could have here is a pullback here, filling this gap here. So strong pullback. Everyone thinks it's going to go down before we have some consolidation, a bounce here, and then we reverse to the upside. This is more neutral bullish. Notice how we have a fill of this gap, but this gap is not necessarily filled. Um, So I would be on the lookout for if we do break below the 595. If we have some strength in this chop zone that we had a while back, obviously you can see a lot of chop happening here. We can build some liquidity in this area to break above this 595 level. Um, Likewise for, let's look at our downside, right? So our downside is obviously some really strong, I want to see some solid downwards pressure, like to the point where we finally get into this range, and then we're in this area I mentioned earlier with our chop here, right? um if we have any supportive bounce here, we can look towards the previous outcome with the orange for looking for a retest of the 595 level. But if we truly want to lean bearish, I would see us having maybe a bounce here at a previous support, but continued downtrend and retesting our strong pivotal level here at 590.75. That was the key level last week. Obviously, we had some gap ups here, so we couldn't really see the true potential of it, but there was a little bit of support in this range here. The reason for this, that I'm looking for really strong downward pressure before I consider anything bearish, is because we have our 20 SMA here, which acted as support right around here, previously acting as resistance, and our 5 EMA has been support along the way. Oh, that's not support there. It has been support here, even on some pullbacks further back, it was in support. So our 5 EMA is going to be our overall trend holding up. So if we do have some strong downwards pressure, I would imagine that our 20 EMA would start to catch up here, or even a little higher up. Let's say it catches up here and we have this strong downtrend, and our 5 is starting to catch up here. I would like to see how price reacts here before I decide to have any shorts. So if we have some type of breakdown here, we reject off this 20, retest our 590 level, and maybe a stronger rejection off the 590 uh, level here, or our 20 SMA, um, and failure to have support at our 5 EMA before we can really consider any downtrend. Um, obviously with the with the EMAs catching up, if we do have any downtrend, it will catch up fairly fast. So we'll see something in this range here. But our expected low of the range is kind of where our EMAs are grouping up. So if we do have some downtrend here, we might not break underneath our 590 level in a strong downwards pressure in the week. Meaning if we have our EMAs catching up here, we're breaking down, we might have some chop here and then close the week right here. We may not see that downward pressure right away. So just bear in mind with that. But I would just look at least for this. If you're gonna chase this downward pressure, look for us to fail under 595, and then all these supports I will provide for you, at least that you can use those levels for some exits on the way down. Right here is another interesting outcome here. That I noticed. Let's do it in yellow. So we could have as well a large downward pressure, right? Obviously, and we'll have our EMAs catching up. And this is where I said it would be tricky for this gap, right? Um, and what I mean by it tricky, so this is going to be our EMAs, they're going to catch up, right? We have some strong downward pressure. We could likely bounce anywhere in this range, right? We could bounce here, we could bounce there, we could bounce somewhere here, literally could bounce anywhere. So if we do start seeing some failures under 590, I would not be so quick to assume that we're going to fill this gap. As you've seen in the past here, our gap that we had for quite some time, which is this pink purplish level, um, we did not really fill it for a while, right? The gap happened. When did it happen? So we had the gap around the election, right? November 5th area. And we never filled the gap almost 2 months in, right? It took almost 2 months before we actually filled the gap. So, not saying that this gap will take 2 months to fill, but just wanted to point out that it may not be an easy gap down, as you may think, right? But this gap fill here is much more likely to take place as opposed to a gap here. But that doesn't necessarily mean we'll fill this gap. Just heads up. But I did want to mention that this gap on the lower end here is not necessarily guaranteed to fill right away. So just be on the lookout for that. All right, let's head over to QQQ. All right, I'll try to be quick with QQQ. There's not too much that I wanted to note on this. So for the weekly QQQ, let's take on our levels here for a second. Some richer SPY. Um, we have a lower low on the weekly candle and a lower low and a lower high on the weekly candle. Continued downtrend here. But as I mentioned last week, it's not a complete invalidation of our strong uptrend that happened took place since the end of September. Here was the pullback channel that I mentioned last week. We did not close underneath this channel for any strong convictions that were like on a large downtrend. Our 50 level is right around here as well. So we're near the 50% pullback of this bull trend that we're in. So not necessarily bullish, but we do have this channel here that's still bearish, right? Let's look at the daily here. This is something else that I noticed as well. So our candle here, it's not a pretty candle, but it looks more hammerish than SPY. I'll say that. And we did close above the smaller trend that we were having here. This trend is just pretty much 2 weeks of price action. So we have a sloping resistance here and a sloping support here taking place. We finally closed above it. There was a value gap here that did get filled, but it was there was a value gap that did get filled here. Unfortunately, our wedge that we were looking for last week was a breakdown retest of this range before a rejection. This is what we were looking for, a rejection here or a rejection here. Both of these did not take place as we gapped up here. Okay, both of those did not take place as we gapped up, and our EMAs again are pointing up. With our 5 lagging a little bit underneath our 20. So if we do want to see some strong price action, I do want to see our 5 start to cross above our 50 at least. It doesn't necessarily have to cross above our 20, but I do want to see it above our 50 once again. Um, just to indicate that our strong uptrend is still holding on the short term right now. Currently, it's not showing that, right? It's showing that we have our 50 SMA is showing that we're on an uptrend, but our 5V SMA is showing that we're currently not recapturing the trend. So I would look for us to hold over our 515, 516 level For any continued upside, I would, and any downside, probably a break underneath our 510 level here. Our expected low of the week is around 511. So any chop around this area could be, I would say, an exit point for any shorts that would take place. Do you want to see us hold over 521 or 5, rather 520.54? This was a level that we identified before, as the break of our channel, and it's our fill of our value gap here. So a retest here and holding over 520.54 would be really, really bullish. Well, not extremely bullish, but I would not lean bearish at all at that point. And this is what we need to hold for continued price action on the upwards side. We do have 523 ish, not having, we're unable to have a body close above there. It was previous support, slight resistance. I would like us to at least capture at least a psych level as well for any push towards the upside, right? Our upwards target here is 531.75. That doesn't necessarily have to get filled. It is just our expected value range for the week. All right, and let's just go through a quick pathing here as well for IW or for QQQ. So for quick pathing here, on the upside, I do want to see us hold over our support here. It's at 521. I believe it's 521.89. I can't see it. It's cut off here. Um, but I would like to see us hold above this. As you see, we're testing this just at the close. So a break above here, a retest of it for any continued upside would be great, with our resistances being these red lines that I will post for you afterwards. So I would look for any upside above this level. For open, it may look more like this before we have some upside, maybe playing our resistances here. We can also have a little bit of a pullback here, retest our strong pivotal point here at 516 before having some continued upside. For our downside, unlike SPY, this is what I mentioned earlier. So our gap is just the initial push up. We don't necessarily have that smaller gap that SPY had here. Uh, ooh, let's zoom in a little bit without zooming in on the whole screen. Okay, so unlike SPY had our huge gap up here, and the gap here is not necessarily as large. So if QQQ starts to have some strong fills of this gap continuously on the downside and not having any bounces around the 516 level, it's safe to assume that we could continue to gap and go down, and maybe retest five our 514 pivotal level here. That's another significant level. So if we do fill this gap, we look for us to see if we can bounce, reclaim this 516 level. If not, then break underneath and continued to a retest of this range, which is our expected level in the range. All right. And that's for the downside. So let's look at more of our neutral, right? So our orange is always going to be our neutral. For our neutral, it's similar aspects. We're going to fill this gap. But on a downtrend like this, we have multiple EMAs that are just gonna, or SMAs, sorry, that are gonna be grouping up. So for our neutral, we'll probably have some our EMA or SMAs having acting as support and resistance, leading to a little bit of a chop, maybe a retest on the lower end of this range here. Again, not I am not looking to make assumptions that we're gonna fill this gap immediately. Even our low expected range is still in the lower end of our gap, right? We have the gap is still here. So I would look for us to retest this level here and maybe close somewhere around the pivotal point here around 514 for our neutral. Again, I not too keen on assuming that we'll have a gap and go down, right? This gap seems more likely to be filled. All right, here. And let's go to our IWM quickly. Okay, so IWM, let's hide this for a second. All right, so IWM, we have an equal rejection here around the 227 level. Here we have rejection, 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 rejection here, rejection here. It acted as support at some point, but we have multiple rejections at the 227 level. Um, this was our break of our wedge that we had, or rather, our bear flag that we had playing out here. Uh, we played this last week looking for the rejection here under. Um, for an as we have this gap up here, I'm still not leaning bullish on QQQ or IWM until we can start closing above that 227 level. So it's going to be strictly clean cut above 227. I would say bullish, below 227 bearish. Our 50 SMA is catching up to where our 50% mark of our recovery on the downtrend here. That's what this line here is at 530.73. This is our 50%, and our 50 SMA is there as well. With QQQ, if there's any strong pullbacks, it does look to capture the 50 SMA. It is a much tighter range, so holding on to that 50 SMA is much more important as opposed to our 200 SMA for any other stocks, right? You're looking for long-term overall growth. With with IWM having smaller intraday movements, you definitely want to see our 50 SMA being within range, right? So it's completely out of range at the moment. So I'd like us to try to have a retest here, but overall, over 227 is bullish, under 227 is bearish. More confidently bearish under 224.16. Um, that would lead for us to have a retest of our 5 EMA for any continued downside. We do have news this week. I believe it's Thursday. Our unemployment claims, that'll do a little bit to help us with IWM if it is positive, because with unemployment claims, the less unemployment that's being claimed, me, aka people have more money and they're actually employed to spend that money, and small caps rely on that money from investors, right? That risky investing in a small cap is a risky asset. So with us having lower unemployment claims, it would lead us to believe that people are more willing to put money into risky assets, right? Such as our small caps. Okay, and then quickly just a run through of our overalls here. Again, all the levels I will post at the end here, and as well as our news for the week. I'll break it down as best as I can. I'll submit it. If you did not see last week's, it's going to be the similar formatting. It's just kind of how I have my notes for the live. So for our high yield corporate bonds here, we're continuing a nice uptrend here. We had a small pullback before the gap up, but our SMAs are definitely pointing up. I want to see us retest this channel before I have any confirmations that we're in a strong uptrend, because right now this channel here is not necessarily a downtrend. It's more of a, I would say, a tapering consolidation kind of no man's land area. So I want to see us break above or below for any strong confirmations that we have, whether it's a risk on or risk off environment, right? If we start breaking above this 79.80 level, it's definitely much more risk on, and we can expect highs for all our, our semiconductors, our um Amazon, our Teslas, our spies. Like, you really want to see some strong upwards momentum here in our corporate bonds, people having more strength and confidence in growth stocks, right? That's what leads the market typically with volume, right? So you definitely want to see this holding an upward channel here. It is, yeah, where we retested the 50 SMA, so any holds over here, and we have a strong upwards channel here on the, or upwards jump here on our 5, which is our yellow. So just wanted to point that out. And our TLT, this is our treasury bonds. Typically this is going to be inverse, so if it doesn't, it will go with SPY, but one thing you want to look out for is the inverse. So you want to see it going down as SPY is going up. And that just means that people are more, once again, willing to invest in riskier assets, right? Or Teslas or Nvidias. All these assets are much more risky, right? Because they have uh, expected growth. That's how the stock, shoots up, right? Nvidia has the expectation that it's going to have this new graphics card. It's going to partner with AMD. It's going to do all of these things, and that's when you're going to start seeing some upwards momentum, and that's where the confidence comes in. So one thing I do see here with our TLT is we had a few um opportunities here where we had a pullback, build liquidity for strong downtrend. Likewise here, I see us having a similar thing taking place here where we're building up some liquidity to possibly have a stronger downtrend. I would look for a rejection around the 90 level, which is congruent with our 50 SMA. Last thing here, our XLE here. This is something we mentioned last week with the stagflation. So we're continued on the strong uptrend. In fact, it's even stronger of an uptrend. Um, our energy sector is absolutely going through the roof right now. It could be partly due to Trump's inauguration. Because typically, when we start seeing large momentum in our energy stocks, we won't see SPY have such a strong upwards momentum. Uh, SPY and QQQ rather. SPY will definitely feel it, but QQQ won't have that huge jump up. Same thing with IWM and all these other smaller caps, right? It will influence SPY, but not as much on these other riskier assets as in small caps and tech and so on. We do have some news this week, so it's worth mentioning to see if we can close above this level here, our 594 level. Or if we have any pullback, don't we don't want to see it break underneath our 90 level. XLF, XLV. This is something I wanted to mention. For a while here, I actually extended this channel, so we had this channel going on for a while now. I would say like the beginning of December we had this channel, so we have just been holding this channel for the longest. We're finally at another area of a retest, right? So this is our XLV, our healthcare sector. So it typically is our defense. It typically acts as defensive, especially when the economy is not doing too well. So I like to see us if we can close to break out of this channel and start closing above it. It would show that we are leaning more on a risk off, which is less geared towards tech and more towards our defensives. So I'm kind of curious to see if we can start closing above it. Yes, the healthcare sector is not as large, but it does act as a very strong defensive stocks. It acts as very strong defensive stocks when we start losing confidence in either the economy or growth stocks. So it's worth mentioning. Uh, what else? Let's see. Our XLP, nothing major. XLRE. This is our realistic sector. This is gonna have some news this week. Just wanted to point out our 50 SMA and our 50% move on the retracement here is it lines up perfectly. So we do have some news taking place, I believe, towards the end of the week, the new home sales. So it's just worth mentioning. You want to see if we have some strong upwards momentum. That's good for our financial sector. Currently, the financial sector and the energy sector is holding up SPY. So we do want to see that continued growth on those aspects of the market, right? And that is for it for me. If IntheZone want to take over. Uzman, you there? Yeah. Improv. Yeah, I'll post all my levels towards the end of the night as well as the live. I just sent out the news for the week and kind of what you can expect from it. In the general chat, I added everyone, so please take a look at that. Because you do want to make sure you're staying on top of it, especially with one thing I do want to point out is Trump will have an official presidential speech tomorrow at 12. Um, Typically, with our presidents having uh, presidential speeches, it doesn't always move the market. But with this being one of his first, and all the hype was over Trump's, inauguration here, it would be interesting to see how it takes place. Any any choice of words that he mentions could literally change the market, right? So may not be as severe as Powell, but it will definitely help with our sentiment for the market. So just be cautious around 12 p.m. and try to not size in as large, at least for the beginning of the afternoon. Any other questions anyone may have? I'm gonna go ahead and end the live, but if you guys have any